Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the Keshe Plasma Reactor group once again for Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, some parts of the world. That is Tuesday, March 13th, 2018 today. And once again, we will be discussing things generally of the Keshe nature here. What does that mean? It's usually in the nature of what is called plasma science or plasma technology, and not in the ordinary sense of plasma that the scientists think of plasma, which is only 99.98% of the universe. We also, in this line of thinking, also include the other 0.02%, which is us, everything around us, and all of the things of the matter level, planets, and so on, compose that 0.2% of all matter. And that is actually the more important matter. That is the matter to the people within the influence of Earth's gravity and atmospheric conditions, and that's where we find ourselves, at least at this current moment. So you would think that the scientists would put a little more attention, and that if plasma composes 99.98% of the universe, maybe we should have a closer look at the 0.02% that we are, and maybe just by chance, maybe we are a reflection of that plasma. And in fact, if you look at everything really, really closely, right down to the atomic level, inside the proton and electron and beyond, you get into a plasmatic state rather than particle state. So it turns out particles are basically a bunch of wound up magnetic fields, magnetic gravitational, or what we call maggrav fields, in packages. And these packages seem to have boundaries around them. We think of an atom with a proton. We think of a proton as a, let me see, I have a sample round ball here. Well, here's a ball that's kind of indicative of something. We could say that that ball inside here is a proton in the center of an atom, and we think of the field of that proton might be in a package that's around the proton, or same with the electron. It has a sphere of influence around it, but it's contained within its package. It doesn't tend to, fields don't suddenly go somewhere else and affect things and so on, depending. And start to get into the quantum ideas, then that changes a bit. But in essence, it comes down to everything, including us, especially us perhaps, are composed of fields of influence, fields of energy, fields of magnetic gravitational fields, electric fields, magnetic fields, electromagnetic fields. All of these kinds of fields are definitely passing through our bodies virtually all the time. There's nowhere you can go that doesn't have radio waves passing through you, for example. Probably, I don't know, 1,000 radio stations right now, or the radio waves are passing through my body, and some of that resonates with different parts of the body and so on. So we've shown this here before, and it's somehow a topic that might be interesting to pursue a little more. But I wanted to find out if anybody has anything they would like to show or talk about at this point, and maybe we can get into that, the idea of field interaction a little later. So let me first get my live stream chat open. There we go. And does anybody here in today's grouping have something they'd like to bring up, or any questions or particular topics? Maybe that new self-generating reactor that you just put together you'd like to show, or definitely always into yet another demonstration of levitation and lift. If you could levitate your desk, that'd be pretty cool. No takers? Oh, darn it. How about no flying cars this week? Come on, guys. Gotta get busy out there. I think it's time for flying cars. In fact, there are designs in the latest car show for flying cars. And that's starting to become a buzzword now, and people are becoming interested. And but of course, they're trying to do it cars like they do the little drones now that have four engines, four electric motors on them. These flying cars have basically 4 to 6, some of them 8 electric motors with propellers. So it's sort of like a helicopter, maybe a little safer. If a motor goes, then you still get to fly. But it just means instead of chopping things up with one blade, you chop things up with 8 blades instead. It doesn't seem like a good idea for things like birds and small animals, and children, things like that. But man persists in this way of flying. But I think that once this starts to come on, it'll provide a big opening for a new kind of flight. It'll be acceptable and easy to control in the future, because it's all going to become automated. These drones are automated, and they become the norm for delivery of goods, and delivery of pizza, and delivery of virtually anything you want to your doorstep within 5 or 10 minutes. And this is the promise of the near future. In fact, it's already happening. Amazon does deliveries by drone in certain places, and they have that in place to do it in every major city of, well, North America, but also the world. And have drone delivered pizza to your door, still hot from the oven. Okay, enough of me yapping here. Anybody like to go ahead? Stephen Lee says, I would like to see the fields of a really good field generator. See the fields of a really good field generator. Well, what would be a really good field generator? I've got one in mind, but for example, these things are pretty good field generators. Oh, my electrical supply here. Your traditional plasma globe. And flip it on there, you can see. So it's definitely generating fields within the globe, right? You can see the inner part is glowing and the outer parts are, maybe you'll see it better like this. You get the effect, everybody's seeing a plasma ball. So just in terms of the fields and the interaction, it might be good to make a little drawing actually and talk about it a bit. So you can see we have the inner glowing sort of orb in the middle there, from whence the sparks like that one seem to come from. Okay, well that's because there's a wire that goes up the center of that inner glass envelope, which is actually exposed to the outside atmosphere. Actually, I've got one. Let's have a look at it here. Oh, I'm wrapped up in my wired arrangement. Here it is. It's not such a good example because, well, it'll do. Shows what I mean. So this is a plasma ball that didn't behave properly, and I took it all apart, took the guts out of it and whatnot. But it shows, if you can see, kind of here, yeah. You can see down the center there, there's a hole that goes up there. Actually, this whole glass envelope in the center was open, but I filled it with some crystal. That's some crystal stuff that I put together with some GANs and some other things to make as a center electrode for this plasma ball. So, but what it is when they manufacture the plasma ball, they make it with an envelope that goes inside and that's exposed and open to the atmosphere here. This goes right into the center tube there, basically. And that way they can stick the... do I have the other part to this? I usually have it handy here, so I can shock ghee with it and that kind of thing, but I'm not sure where it is right now. But the other part that goes with this, with the electronics on it that actually generates the high voltage, has a wire that comes out, and the wire goes into that center post there, and so it's insulated and isolated from the electronics on the bottom here, and is able to project its to create the gradient, or the polarity there, to cause the effect. And there's gases inside the globe which are easily ionized, and that's what causes all the effects that we see. So, but what I wanted to do is, let's just let me get a whiteboard up. I wonder if I should use that. No, I'll do it the other way. Okay, let me get a whiteboard up here. And go that up here. Okay, and okay, let me see here. So let's let me make an actual circle. There we go. So let's assume that's the circle of the globe of the plasma ball, and inside here we have a use that square thingy. Bear with me a second here. So inside there's an envelope that's open to the atmosphere here. Not sure if I can do that. Let me see if I can try to erase part of it. Oops, that didn't work. Okay, never mind, I won't do that. And so the idea is you've got this central source. Let's make that a different color, say orangey thing here. Let's say this central source here of the fields, and around that, and that's say emitting or absorbing, either way it's got a gradient. And then within the envelope of this sphere, there's a certain conditions in atmosphere that creates the visual effects that we see from basically the scraping, or the scraping of the fields, as Mr. Keshe says sometimes, but basically it's the interaction of various fields and particles and whatnot are creating these visual effects that we see. Okay, well that's basically what's happening within the environment of the plasma ball. So we can see there's an inner field being generated and an outer barrier, you might say, and certain conditions inside. And you can put your hand on it and cause different effects to happen inside the streamers. Maybe purple, various colored streamers, depending on the gases of the particular plasma ball, might come out. And if you put your hand by it, they would tend to concentrate and focus on your hand, for example. Okay, well, everybody's fairly familiar with that whole idea. But what about what is happening outside of the sphere itself? What about the fields there? It's not something that we often consider. But the typical plasma ball puts out a field around it. In fact, it puts out a series of fields, and it comes right down to it. So, for example, this plasma ball might have a field that goes out. This is not very to scale, but it would be, let me see, how can we do that there, this one. This sphere of influence of the plasma ball might be say 2 meters. Let me see if I can make that bigger. No, it's okay. Well, that'll do. So it could be like 2 meters, 5 or 6 feet, say. It could be an easily measurable field from that plasma ball. So this is something we don't normally consider. But what happens if you were to put, say, an ordinary human being, if say there's a human out here, we'll make a stick human. And he may not have any influence outside of this sphere, and he can measure, let me see, measuring tool, say, could have a measuring tool and measure this plasma and be able to tell that there is a barrier or an actual sphere around this central field being generated. Okay, so what I'd like to examine is what happens when the human enters into this sphere of influence, this field around the plasma ball, and how does that affect the measurements that the human is making? Because there's a saying that if you want to measure the radioactivity in a room, then you don't measure the radioactivity in the air, you measure the humans, because they absorb the fields so well that the device just, relatively goes off the scale compared to trying to measure just the air or the environment or some other thing that's inert. Okay, does that make sense? And I can give a demonstration of that, actually. It's kind of interesting. So I wanted to sort of talk about this, as I've talked about it before in many ways. Hi John, I see you. John Blivin just came in here, so I'll promote you to panelist so you can speak and so on there, John. This is kind of up your alley, actually. John, you can speak there if you want. Hi.
One of the things that we noticed when we were experimenting with the dynamic reactors is that when a human went into the field, that you could actually extend it out farther. So one person could put their hand in that field, and then another person could connect to them, and another person could connect to them. So you could actually move the field out, in some cases, rather substantially.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can also, when you go into the field, you can influence the field. So
Yes.
with like the dynamic reactors, um, and it's subtle, but you can hear the motor speed changing, for example.
Right.
You can if you're measuring it with a beeper, you can influence it to where the beeper will extend out or go in, depending on what with your energies, how you move it, if you will.
Yep. Yep, definitely. Let me see, what's the best way to do this? Okay, I have it set up here, but will it work? Okay, let me try something here. I'm not sure if everything's going to work the way I hope it is. Okay, just bear with me a second here. I see if this gets hooked up or not. Okay, all the way down. Well, this will, let me see, I think I'll make my video on, stop this share screen briefly. Yeah, I wanted to, let's get my screen up. And spotlight, there we go. I wanted to experiment a bit with this new sensor that I made. What it is a simple nano-coated wire. You see this black, it's a fine fine multi-strand wire. It's for stereo speakers, special wire, and it's very, very fine strands in it. You can maybe see some of them there. They're very fine, and it's nano-coated. Nano coating actually goes right up inside the insulation inside there, and then it's attached at the top to a normal, well, relatively normal, but you see it's soldered in the top up there and attached to the leads for an audio device, an audio plug-in, like a normal audio plug. So I plug that in, and that's plugged into this other deal called an iRig, which is basically it amplifies the signal and turns it from an analog into a digital signal. Normally you plug your guitar into something like that in order to record it on applications. So what I'm going to try to do, I don't know if this is going to work properly with the sound and everything, and you might have to let me know if it becomes too annoying or otherwise disturbing. And let me see a minute here. If I could put this... No, we have to do it this way. Okay, so let me move all you people over here so we can see better. Okay, now let me see if I can get this sound working here without it being too overwhelming. And I think that we'll have to do there. Let's see if this works. Can you guys hear that when I do that? Do you hear a sound now?
No.
You can hear the sound variation there?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, I might have to add a source, I think. No, that's not working. Okay. Oh, I know what I need to do. I'd have to do a share. Okay, so that's what we'll do. How can I do both? I need to be able to have my... Oh, I know. I keep the video on. Okay, so this will be a little tricky, but let's see what I can do here. Okay, if I share this, make that smaller. And open this up. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see the video clearly, but I'll have to do it this way in order to share the computer sound, I think. So let me try it this way. Do you hear that sound? It's not coming through yet, is it?
No.
Okay, it should come through. Why is it not coming through? Okay, just a second here. Maybe the playthrough is not happening. Just wanted to show my program that I use here. Let's try this. That should be working, right? You hear that? Some background noise. Where's my video going now? Ah, there it is. Okay, I can put that over here. Okay, now do you hear this? That sound? I know it's coming through in live stream. Pardon
Not
me?
yet.
Not yet? No. Okay, let me just reshare then. Still not coming through, eh? Okay, let me see. I'd have to do something different, I guess, to... Okay, then what I can do... Oh, goodness. There should be an easy solution here. Just have to figure it out. Just give me a moment here. Let's see if I can put this on something different. Can you hear that yet on the Zoom? No?
Yeah, something's going on.
Oh, okay. Good. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be. Okay. Good. So now that you can hear something, now I can do a little bit of fine-tuning on this to make it a little more audio, and they can see that on live stream as well, I believe. And you should be able to hear it now on live stream. So what I've got, hopefully you can hear this and it'll work out. Let me know if it doesn't work properly or what we're getting here. And so I've got this sensor, and when I touch it, so it's quite sensitive. To the fields of my body, and it's even sensitive when I put it close to me without touching it, and it's also sensitive to other sorry, I just have to move the wire so it doesn't make that kind of funny noise. Whoa, here we go. Okay, so and if I move it around the room, you get different sounds. Maybe if I move it close to my modem, you'll probably get a sound from that. That was close to the modem underneath. So, but what I'm interested in, I think the heater here might... The heater makes a particular sound. But what we're interested in is this plasma globe here. So let's turn that on and see what that difference that makes. Reach the switch here. Okay, right away you can hear that going on and off. Let me just try that again. I've got this about, it's more than a meter away now. Let me put it, oops, sorry for that disturbing noise there. Let me just lay this on the desk over here. Oh no, I can't do that because I don't want the water to go. I have to have my little stand here for it. There we go. put that in there. Okay, it's sitting there now. This is well over 2 meters away. I'll try the switch now. You can hear it a little bit. But it's much diminished. Okay, so 2 meters away. Whoops, sorry about that. Try. This thing's so sensitive to. This is like the early days of crystal radio. I'm not quite sure what it's sensitive to yet. I'm going to turn down the input a bit in case there's an overload here on the live stream. Okay, so what I've got is I would like to measure. I have to stand up for this job. I would like to measure the fields as I get close to the plasma ball. Okay, I'm about 1 meter away now. Okay, I'll do it sideways where you can see the distance better there.
We can't see any video.
Oh, you're not able to see the video. Maybe I'll have to spotlight it again or something. How can I thought you'd be able to see that. They can see it on the live stream, but not, you guys can't. Okay, let's see, how can I... So you can't see the video there?
Just a little small box, Rick, not a full screen.
Even now, eh? Okay.
There is the screen sharing, which takes the most space on the screen.
Yes, and you can't share the video. I'd have to... how can I do that so you can see it on my share screen? Maybe I can open an instance of the QuickTime and let me just bear with me a second here. It'd be good to be able to get this to work properly. Okay, can you see that now on the share screen, the video?
Yeah, now I can see it.
Okay.
Yes, it's good.
Good, that's the QuickTime running on there and my Zoom running in the other one. Hopefully this isn't going to break something.
By the way, Zoom has a new feature in the share screen to share a second camera.
Oh.
I don't...
if I had a second camera...
It has been introduced about 1 month ago, so if you have several video cameras, the next one will not appear as a camera, but will appear in the share screen menu.
Oh, wow.
Once you can try that, but now it's fine, so don't change it, please.
Yes, right. I can change the window size if needed. Okay, so here we are back again. And let me sort of see, I can show you the distance here. Yeah, I guess the lighting's kind of okay. Yeah, it'll work. So let's see when the sensor gets closer here. You can see it right about that far away. I'll try it over this way too. So there's definitely like a barrier. I'll try it over on top of it. I can go up as far as almost 1.5 meters above. So there's nothing about 1 meter above. I'll lower the sensor. Let me raise the camera even better. Okay, I'm starting to detect something there. And it gets a bit overwhelming without changing my audio input signal a bit there. I just wanted to see what the outer... Now, there's a separate sphere much further out. You hear that sound? That's basically the sound of entering into the Coulomb barrier. I'm going to put the unit further back on the table so I can get more range out of it here. Let's try that. And now I'm back more than 2 meters away with the sensor. Try to get in the range here. And it's pretty quiet, let's say. Now right there, about a little more than 1 meter away. Excuse me while I move my wires a bit here, so try to get a more consistent signal. Okay, let everything rest a bit here. There's a definite barrier further out, but it's a lot more subtle than when we get closer in. Let's do the closer in one again. Definitely a very busy place in there. Lots of sound action. There are many different fields actually. A wide spectrum, as they say, a wide bandwidth of fields coming off this thing. And I'll turn down the input if I can. Let's see, I've got 2 ways to do that. That's down all the way. And in my application here, okay, I'm going to turn down the input volume, and hopefully it'll be able to handle the sound. We'll be able to handle the sound a little better when I get closer to it. So now it's very subtle background noise, so I'll get close to that inner sphere again. Actually, I'm going to move the ball a little closer so it's easier to work with. Okay, here we go. Just 1 second. Get lighting is just not very good here. I don't want it that way either. Okay, that sort of works. Okay, here we go. This is what I wanted to show. You see how close it is now? The sound's virtually disappeared. Let me move it back out again. So again, let me show you the range that we're going through here. Starts right about here. Really intense here. There it is, within a centimeter of the ball. You can barely hear it. And there it is, actually touching the ball, and the noise virtually stops. Which to me is counterintuitive. That's exactly the opposite of what I would expect. Alright, you can see that the globe is actually attracting, and I'm getting no sound. It's like killed the audio from this. But if I move out a bit, in fact, you can tell there's a whole series, there's a series of spheres around this sphere, because it increases and decreases in the sound level. Let's try it again. There's definitely, I would say it seems like there's two spheres of the fields. There's, you hear it, when I move the detector away, you hear it about here and about here again, as if there was two Coulomb barriers, I would call it, basically. Let's just show it again here. So there's one out here where it starts, but there's a really big one right about here. Watch. And then it gets beyond that. interesting. So we can see there's at least two spheres that can be detected where it's very intense. There's a concentration of the fields, and it's a varying fields because it's not just one signal we're hearing, it's a full range of signal. It's already been transformed through my sound software. I can raise or lower the pitch to hear the sound in different ways as far as that goes. But I think it's quite fascinating. Now, we were talking about earlier the idea of the human body interaction with these fields. So that's where things get even more interesting, let's say, because okay, so let me try a couple of experiments here. I've got this, let's say I keep the detector about, that's about maybe a meter away. Here's my meter stick, it's somewhere outside, there we go. Here's my handy dandy meter stick. Actually it's a yardstick, but close enough, and that's out to about, whoops, out to about here, let's say. So I'll just keep this at about a meter away, and then I'll use my hand to interfere with the fields and see if that, or interact with the fields and see if that makes any difference. Okay, so let's just see here. Okay, the other thing I'll do is I'll grab onto this, so now I'm more attached to the apparatus, you could say. Oh, am I ever? Okay, so oh wow. That's amazing. I'm touching the plasma ball. You can hear the action inside the plasma ball. It's quiet right now, but when I move my hand away, Interesting. So what happens when I move my entire body close to... Whoops, let me move this over here. Hopefully the sound's not becoming too overwhelming there, but we'll deal with it. Okay, I'm going to move my whole body over. Touching the plasma ball, nothing. Moving away. Wow. See how my body has extended the fields that we detect. Now my body is able to detect those places of high amplitude. The body is absorbing those and pulling them out further than they were normally. So I've got one here. There's one out here. There's one about a little less than a meter away. There's another one. That's about maybe 40, 50 centimeters, or yeah, maybe 20 or 30 centimeters. And the one that was really close before with just the sensor, I don't get that with my body. I've got to be about a foot away to get anything. But with the sensor, just the sensor instead of my whole body, it detects it much closer. Okay, that's interesting. Now, if I'm going to hold the ground part of the sensor, because what I've got here is this electrode here is a single wire, it's multi-stranded, but a single wire. It's attached to both of the stereo input parts of the plug. And then the ground is grounded to this cap. So if I touch the cap, in effect I'm grounded with the ground part of the system of the wire. So let's try it that way. Okay, that's about the same. Let's try it with my body. Interesting. So now that I'm grounded, it seems like the fields are not being detected inside my body. Let's see if that's true when I'm right up close and bring the detector in. Well, the fields are definitely way less detectable. They've concentrated themselves. So now we have one field there, one field there, and a big one out there, but it's much tighter. The secondary field is much tighter in with me grounded. Somehow it's influencing that. But if I move back with my body, then I detect it out here, here, and and about that far away too. So it's pretty strange. It's very interesting. What else about that? So yes, we were talking about our fields and how they influence it, and maybe we can just have a look back at our diagram, or maybe we can get some comments from people here. I don't want to overwhelm you with this sound input. It's a bit distracting. Let me turn that off. Let's see here. Turn that off. There we go. And you can see, I'll just show you briefly my program here that I use to pick up the sound in from the device that I have. And let me see, you should be able to see that. I'm not sure if all that shows up. It shows up on the live stream. Oh, I see, when I click on it, it shows up. But I've got a pitch control and a bandpass filter and various other controls and so on here in this program, which is called Audio Hijack. Audio Hijack Pro, actually. And it works really well for combining streams and altering your sound input in live real time. These different modules and whatnot. Okay, let me is there anything you want me to try, or any questions or anything about this particular demonstration? Maybe I'm not sure if I'm getting the sound correctly now, so I might have to Nicholas, are you trying to speak and I'm not hearing you? Is that maybe what's happening? Or someone give me a sound check and see if I can hear anything. I think I might have to stop my program here, take it down. Let's see what's going on. Probably it might have been my QuickTime. Let me stop the QuickTime. And I'm going to quit the audio hijack. And see if I can. Okay, I'm going to quit my audio hijack and see if I can get my sound back. Someone give me a sound check to see if the sound is actually working here.
Is it working?
Yes, thank you. Perfect. Okay, I'll get my video back on. And should work here, but it's going to the wrong screen. What's happening? Okay, just a second. My video needs to be repinned or something here. Screen. There, it should work. Goes to the wrong screen. Okay, well, I think you can see my video there okay. Holy cow. It's quite a setup change here to get everything to work properly. Okay, well, I hope you got the idea there, at least, of the field interaction that our bodies, the main idea is trying to present is that our bodies actually interact with fields and change the shape of those fields just from our presence. And we're just talking about more or less coarse matter level fields here. In a way, it's you know, it's a plasma ball. It's not that subtle. It's just an electric field. It's pretty well known and so on. But it does demonstrate the idea of the interaction of fields and the idea that our presence in fields alters the shape of those fields, whether we wish to or not. It gets changed just because fields interact with us. Fields interact with water, for example. That's why I have this sensor in water here. I wanted to see, this is distilled water, normally an insulator, but it has it's actually very sensitive to the field interaction, and probably the amount of water would make a difference in terms of its resonant frequencies it would pick up and so on. Different kinds of water can be tried as well, GANS waters and different pHs and so on. Lots of room for experimentation there as far as detectors go. And many detectors that are being built by scientists nowadays are based on copper oxide and other types of oxides, very similar to the experiments that we do to create our nano-structured surfaces with using caustic and some other processes, the heat process and whatnot. Sorry, I see we have some attendees here, and I need to promote you to panelists. I forgot that we have the new setup here where you need to be promoted or allowed to talk. I prefer to promote. That works a lot better. So sorry if you felt like you were a mute for the last while, because you were muted. But go ahead. Yes, hi Mario.
Yeah, hi Rick. I was wondering, can you use that as a, because I have tried this myself, I have a pickup here. I get always very mixed results. So I have not really, and it's kind of time consuming and I haven't worked on it very much. Is there a way you can hear some kind of difference between CuO, CH3, and what am I missing, CO2? In other words, use it as a plasma detector. Maybe the same amount and find different diameters so you can...
Well, that's right. Yeah, that was one of the ideas of this apparatus I had set up here with the coil and so on, so that I could put different test tubes, just a straight test tube of, you know, say that this was, it's got some GANs on the bottom there, this is 3 kinds of GANs, and that it could go down inside this coil, and this would be hooked up to the crystal radio circuit to give it a, be able to pick up on the fields. And you can actually note a difference in the fields when the different water's going, but it's very subtle. You'd have to spend a lot of time with it to tune the apparatus and set up the structures and so on to be able to see the waveform and actually see the subtle differences that occur and try to notate them and pick up on it. But I think that could be one way of doing it. Actually, is it may not be, the coil setup may not be the correct way. There might be other ways of, like for example, maybe this detector could simply be put, if this is the GANs, then you simply put this inside the GANs water and use this as the detector and clean it off each time and try it in different GANs waters to see what difference in the signal there is and whatnot. So there's definitely room for experimentation in that and trying to standardize some sort of test and to actually experiment with the waveform, which is like the way I have it set up, it's an audio signal, and you can alter that in many ways through that program I showed, and I've shown some of that before and so on. and that could, you know, you could get into hours of just playing around and looking at all the variables on that realm of detecting. But that is an audio thing. It's all audio feedback, which is great because it's instantaneous. As soon as you put it in, you hear the difference. That's why it's great to use it as a field detector. You hear the sound right away, and you know that this distance is a certain sound. You move it away, it's a different sound. You move it in, it's the same sound again. Oh, well, there's definitely a change happening here. We can detect the change through our brain and our ears, and it gives some satisfaction to our physicality to see some physicality response to where these fields are, and how when we put our hand in or we put our body in, we change where those fields are and what they sound like and so on. So the idea is that we could have different kinds of detectors that can perhaps detect the change in the plasma waters. You know, this would be a handy thing to have, and we've looked at other ways of doing it with the absorption paper. What was it, 2 weeks ago or last week was it, with the absorption paper, the traces that the absorption of the different plasma waters make on paper are different for each plasma water, so it can be detected that way. And audio is another great way to do it. If there's a quick audio test where if you could fine-tune everything, the detector, the software, all the hardware, everything that's associated, it's like trying to tune a radio to a radio station. It takes the right combination of hardware and your personal experience with it, and just putting everything in the right positions to be able to get constant, consistent tests. That if you put this in and it goes woo, then it's good GANS water. If you put it in, it goes woo, then it's bad GANS water, basically, right? Very simple audio tests. So if you're in a, industrial setting and you've got all these batches of GANs in front of you in the lab, you want a quick and easy way of detecting what is good, what's a good batch, what's a bad batch, and what's in between. If you're able to go, you know, woo, 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 whoa, oh, that's not a good one. Whoa, woo, 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 whoa. Well, you know the one that goes whoa is, you know, different, at least. And if you know by your testing the one that goes whoa is the bad one, then you know, okay, something went wrong in this test. It's not coming through as clear and proper the way that the other ones are. And maybe it could even be, since we hear so much about putting our intention into water, people write, for example, love on the side of a container, in fact. Oops. A bit of water on the bit of water on the keyboard there. It's going to show that. Does this come off? Yeah. Guy actually had a container here. He's got an apparatus he's making to recreate an old Kelvin experiment. But his container, if you were to put it the right side up, has love written on it. And I was given a container of water years ago that, probably 6-7 years ago, same thing, that this fellow, a friend of mine, discovered that writing love on the side of containers changes the actual nature of the water, changes the structure of the water from your intention being put in it. So, and he was actually an East Coast fisherman, and he'd go out on the fishing boat with his tough Newfoundland fishing buddies, and he would write love on the side of their water bottles that they have out there. And they thought that was a little odd initially, but eventually they kind of got used to it. And now they totally love this whole idea, and now they all write love on the side of their water containers. And when they go out, they're all buddies, and and this has helped bring them together. And that's not even with GANS water, that's just with regular water. So what if we had a detector, kind of a love detector? It could detect the love quotient in water, the love structuring, you might say, the intention, the an intention quality detector. That would be so amazing to have something like that that could detect the quality of water, not in terms of its contamination or its its constituents, but of its essential energy, its love energy, its intention that's gone into it, that unconditional love. If it can be detected, and the people like what's his name, Komoto from Japan, who took pictures of frozen ice and who have different crystalline structures according to whether it had the intention of love or hate put into it, would change the actual crystal structure of the part of the ice as it formed the field. The change in the fields would actually be reflected in the way the crystals froze of the ice. So there's lots of room for experimentation there. If someone wants to devote their lifetime to that, that would be a good time now to do that. Something so simple like this could end up being something very useful, basically, in many fields. Imagine if you could go to a lake with a device like this and tell the energy quality of the water, or to an ocean, and tell whether it's sort of dead seawater, so to speak, or is it alive seawater. So interesting. Sorry, do you want to go ahead there, someone that wanted to speak?
Thanks.
Martin? Is that Martin?
Mark?
Martin?
This is me? Okay. You hear me? Okay.
Yes, we do.
I'm sorry. I just come in to be with you. So I didn't know that I was online.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry. I thought you wanted to say something at this point, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's not bad to go ahead with that.
Well, your line's open. You might as well speak.
Okay. Yes. When I my measurement of the quality of the fields that arrived here, or that I go with, or that I think over inside me, reflects then immediately outside, by colors, light, movement, or stuff like this. Even the crows. So like your name, you're the Kramen, the Kramen. And so you have also this job here in these meetings, and the crows outside, they make the sounds very precise when they feel threatened or too much pressure, too much whatever. They have a nice quality level show display for us, for the beings here, also around me, for my own experience. This is a good way to go.
Yeah, I've got a hummingbird feeder right directly outside my window here, and that's an indicator for me, and I interact with those tiny animals sometimes in that way.
Yes.
So the idea is that we do interact with the fields. The fields of a bird is a good example, and according to our demeanor and our somehow certain birds can be attracted to us. People keep birds as pets and so on, of course, but even in the wild, that entity, that field of a bird. There's a video I just encountered, someone sent me in Facebook a couple of days ago. It was of this small bird that was hanging on to the outside part of the window of this guy's car, just along the strip where the window comes against the door. There's a little rubber strip there, and its feet were grabbed into the rubber strip. And the guy had this, he stopped in traffic, and this bird came up, and he started talking to the bird. And the video kept playing because the video showed the bird and him interacting. And he said, I gotta accelerate here. I have to drive faster. I hope you can hang on and come along for the trip. And the bird's hanging on, and the feathers are ruffling, and he's picking up speed to, highway speeds basically. And he slows down again. The bird hangs in there, and it hangs in for quite a long time. Finally, he stops, and it does fly away eventually. But he's talking to it the whole time and interacting with this bird that's decided to become his companion and come along for the ride. It could have left at any time, but somehow in its little bird mind decided to hang out there and interact with the fields of this
And
whatever.
I think they are made,
thinking.
they are made to be with us. So on the sea, they also are on the ships, and they go to the houses where there was.
Think of the story of Nikola Tesla, for example, the famous story of the dove a white dove, or white pigeon, I guess it was, that kept flying to his apartment in New York City. So he's in this huge apartment building, and up in the upper floors where he liked to be, and this bird would always come to feed at his window. But he became very emotionally attached to this bird, especially he was in the last part of his life, and he became very attached to this one pigeon. It embodied all that he considered of unconditional love and so on. He felt this unconditional love for this bird. So there's many cases of that, of course. So anyway, we do interact with fields, is the idea there, in many ways. And that in that
and
case,
light
with emotions.
Light is an indicator for the fields. Goes up, down, which direction. So for me, the light is a.
So you mean? What do you mean exactly by that? You're saying, like, in the space, if you're sensitive to your space, then the colors and reflections and the way the lights arranges itself in your environment has a different meaning, perhaps, or something else.
Now in this, also before I thought this is just by chance, so the colors change, or the vapor goes away or comes, but now it's so powerful when you are quasi taking over the responsibility for that movement. When you interact in that manner. Before it was just by chance, but now I can see that even that I can steer that level of intensity of the light outside, so you could say the whole space is inside me, and whatever happens outside has the source in me now, so this
So
is
you
very
start wondering.
strong. What?
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt there.
So this is a very strong connection, and it was always like this, but we was not taught, or I could not believe that. You know, I could not. I know it from the teachings like Feng Shui and all those energy based old studies from the Chinese and all our own knowledge about that. But when you then see that yourself are the source of that, then it becomes very powerful imprint, you know. So
right, are we the creator or are we not the creator? And if we are the creator, then what we see is what we've created.
But we respect
we have to take responsibility.
Yeah, when we can comprehend that and then take the responsibility over and steer the wheel, you know,
right,
play the game. And so
it's a much bigger ship than we first anticipated, perhaps, in that sense, you know. It's like, you mean I created everything that I see? Everything in front of me is my creation?
Yes.
Whoa. But that's the same for, it's not like an ego thing, it's the same for everyone if they were to be the creator, because it's the same creator in everyone.
Yeah, we are a sensor, just a sensor points from the same action, you know, from the same moment. Different sensor positions and perspectives and whatever. But everything is important. The black and the white gives the high, you could say, is the high charge and
the which? Say again.
It's you. The black and white is the basic of the. Also gives a lot of charge and to create the colors you need that, you know, the black stuff and the white stuff and.
Right, exactly. We were mentioning this in the last workshop a few hours ago, actually, about the idea of if you have. If you're creating something, whether it's a word composition, which is what we were working on, a particular idea, and try to extrapolate on that idea and make a really nice sort of paragraph that explains that aspect that we're trying to bring out. But when we bring in a bunch of other aspects and try to make it all inclusive to include everything, it's like you can't include all of the colors of the rainbow at once, because then you get white light. And you know, white light has its purpose, and being in the white light's great and all that, but it's there's no discernment then. It's all is one, and if all is one, then there's nothing to do, nothing to discern, nothing to rub against. There's no friction, there's nothing, there is no rainbow if it's all white light. So the rainbows are the different aspects, and as individuals we each bring out our own aspect rather than just all white light, because white light's kind of boring in a way. And that's why we came to Earth, is because then we can experience the colors, the tones, the colors, and it goes with music as well, or with sound, let's say, as well as the visual range of everything that we see. So it's all just interactions with the amino acids of our eyeballs and the interactions of nerve impulses in our ears and this kind of thing. But at the same time, there is an objective reality somewhere out there if we can discern it in a clear way without our usual filters that we've been conditioned and programmed to normally put on.
Yes.
Like
it's a light show, you know. It's like it's a light theater, one show at a time, and we are all within to create the right colors in the right moments. And but
so it's inner and outer kind of at the same time, but we have to prepare ourselves in an inner way in order to see that light in a different way, let's say.
And we steer that light, you know. Also when, as you, yes, I think we, also I do, I steer the whole ship here with me outside. Also the light is under my command, and when you really try, you can steer that. Well,
this is interesting because last night I went out and the stars were out, and it was kind of unusual because it's been quite overcast here lately. So I really was just looking up at the sky for quite a few minutes, which I don't normally do. You know, I would perhaps when I was younger as a kid and so on, and I have a lot of experiences with staring up at the sky. But I was realizing, staring at these little tiny points of light, and you know, this whole idea, we brought it up before. I mean, theoretically the light that comes from these stars and so on could be light years, in some cases hundreds of or even thousands of light years away, and that's the distance light travels in a year of time. So that's big distance, and we see these pinpoints of light, and we attribute meaning to them. They're in constellations. If you were to look at constellations, or if you're an astronomer, you would see the different spectrums of light that come from certain stars that all mean very particular things about that star's development and where it is in its process and what elements are involved, and all that kind of thing can be discerned from the starlight. And then I'm thinking, you know, well, what about back to, you know, maybe 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 years ago or more? What about 1,000,000 years ago, and some being is staring up at these stars and has put so much importance on these stars? In every culture, the stars and the constellations and planets and so on have been so important, and yet, as far as we know, they haven't had the telescopes that we have nowadays to be able to you know, magnify and see these stars in more detail, or detect them in different levels, and there are different levels of radio emissions and that kind of thing. And they were able to just stare at the star, basically. But then we have this idea that perhaps by staring at that star, we're not, or perhaps in the right frame of mind, the right frame of consciousness, perhaps, that staring at the star, you're not staring at the light of the star, but actually making the connection with that position, let's say, of that entity, and or making not even a position, it's a direct connection with that solar system, because each one of those stars is a different solar, or meaning sun, system. So perhaps the ancients could connect directly, is what I'm proposing, and they were seeing more than the light in terms of some sparkly starlight or whatever, but could actually see, or a better way to put it might be to sense or to feel the fields from that actual entity and perhaps make a direct connection, and so in effect be there or be connected to that and get the flavor of that solar system, and perhaps even the planets or beings on that solar system, to be able to connect if they're similar amino acid based entities. And now we believe, as scientists and others in this quantum theory, quantum is more than the theory now, they've actually proven the quantum idea that particles, or what they call particles, can be connected in instant real-time communication. It could be in one particle here, another at the other end of the universe, and they are in direct communication. If you were to look inside of one particle, it'd be like looking inside the other one, and if you were to move one particle, it would move the one on the other end. So that's just a elementary sort of look at the repercussions of that idea. And if we can be in direct connection just by basically maybe you wouldn't even need to see the star in that sense. You just need to connect yourself with it. I mean, we can work with that even in our own crude modern day way with visualization. I mentioned that before, where you can visualize, for example, being on the surface of the sun. Let's say now you're on the surface of the sun, and now you're back again. It's just like we can be there and back, and really intensely if we can visualize properly. Nikola Tesla, for example, he visualized completely all of his inventions before he actually went about constructing them in the physicality. So he would actually put them together, and he would run his turbines and run his motors in his mind, often for months at a time. And he would note the things that were wearing down and how long they would take to wear down, and all the interactions of all the parts, to make sure that the machine, whatever it was, or the device, was functioning properly before he actually went about and built it. And he said every time he built it, finally in the physical, it worked perfectly according to the way he envisioned it. So our envisioning can be very powerful. It gets into the idea of remote viewing, which has been, if it didn't work, then the military and those that are interested in psychic and other forces wouldn't have continued with it for the last 5 decades or more. In fact, that's the way
we are it. We are the creators and of that show. So even we, if you learn Feng Shui and you learn to work with the window, and then you put your balls there or your whatever, and the outside, then you have the reaction of the colors, or then you have maybe other forms of clouds you can just create by your own creation inside. Outside you have response immediately, and so I think that's not a new thing. Also, this is very old teachings about that, and we can all do these experiences, and we create that space around us. So even the stars, I would say, are inside us, also are created a lot also by the mountains and the treetops, and our focus on them give them then energy to light up those you could say light shows in space. So like when you are over a church or a dome, then you have special power in the sky by the form of the two towers and the dome and the clock, and so you have the sound from the clock that makes the microwave, you could say, movement in the skies, and so then even the clock, who shows the time, you know, the Zeiger, how it calls in English, I don't know. But the tethers, they have even special top ends, and depend in which direction they make that connection between Earth and sky, or between middle, as a 9 and 3, and or 6 and 12, or whatever. You have full or middle or whatever transfer of that energy then up to the clouds, and you will create their light reactions in the night by the stars, and through the day by the clouds and the colors and whatever.
Let's not forget their main source of light, which is the sun, which is used to be the object, as far as the what was the physicality way of it, looking at it, the object of worship for many millennia. And it makes sense in a way, because that's where our life comes from, is from the essentially the maggrav rays of the sun, and all of that, the life of the sun has created our ability to be here and be here now. So
but when you then work with the sun, when you work with the lights, when you have a lamp inside, so LED lamp or whatever, and you place that inside the room, in a corner, from down to up or from up to down, so you can make some arrangements inside, and the light outside then goes up or down, so it's like connected.
Funny you
right
mention
away.
that. Oh, go ahead.
It's right. It's you can use lamps inside as a steering wheel of the skies outside, also of the sun too. The sun is connected to those interactions inside the room. If you do that for that reason, you know, it's just the wish for that. And
Here's an example of that connection between the sun and LEDs that we were speaking of, actually. So I just noticed this thing I'd gotten some time ago, and what it is, it's an ordinary sort of mason jar deal, but it's got this special lid, and the lid has a built-in photoelectric cell, in other words a solar cell, and it goes to a battery. It stores the power for an LED here. So it actually converts sunlight into LED power. So it's interesting. It's like a maggrav field conversion apparatus that converts light here, stores it as light here, and so we're essentially storing sunlight through this apparatus. And then I was thinking, well, if you have Gans water in here, and you have this LED in there that's giving essentially the sun energy, but it's of a particular wavelength, then perhaps there's one LED of a particular wavelength that the Gans water would enjoy and would rejuvenate it, or make it more powerful, more energetic in some way. Or maybe it would even build up to a certain energetic level, and then maybe the Gans water would glow. And I was thinking some interesting thoughts like that, where you have a solar-powered Gans water, because this is basically just a transformation apparatus. We can transform the white light, again we get back into that idea of multi-spectrum, broad-spectrum white light, and actually convert it, transform it down You know, that's what man does well, transmuting, transforming light into various forms that we use for particular purposes. Or if you take light as the electromagnetic spectrum, you know, we use X-rays, we use gamma rays, and all the different rays that are part of the spectrum of rays. We should be able to have the correct ray that transforms from sunshine here to the correct wavelength here that is able to make some sort of transformation inside of our GANs or GANs water or some other aspect of the plasma.
You know, I would say the light source, as the light soul, is the connected with every place where is light, in wherever dimensions, and when you steer on one side, then those new frequency, as a new light qualities will be on every part in the same moment. And so when we have these light cables inside the houses for the TVs or the internet, this light,
You mean optical cables? Is that what you mean?
genau. Yes, that's true. And we have that in every technology today, inside the houses or inside machines to send signals in and out, so you can see exactly what the house is needing in one place, and in which place is absorbed what, and what kind of light quality then is put on that field. Also, can I say that? So but when I did experiences with that, I could see that I can steer even the sun with things that I do inside. So I thought maybe that is connected to the fiber cables, because even if they are not in function, so under load or under contract, they are open. You know, these are light porting systems, and so you have like a TV screen who can censor the space around, and then give a very precise analysis of the things that happens inside and goes outside from the inside. So you can even make 3D. So I saw even technologies who worked like a 3D or a surrounding picture. So when I see a picture in the TV screen, like now in the iPhone or a computer, it is the same. You know, it is these light cables that brings that signal to my home and brings the interaction then back. Also, that what's happened here together to the rest of the world and to every place, every in whatever distance. When you have that light interactions, then you will have the same information there in the same moment. And it is a perfect steering wheel for everything that we do here, and even the sun. So I would say, if you can say this too big to say that, but we steer that too with our interactions inside the houses or inside the churches, because these are also light working tools, or light steering or soul steering or leveling institutions. Also even the form and constructions, and every buildings and every thing we do has to do about with that kind of readings. You know, we need that to exist, or we exist, and so we can observe that now. And
just wanted to we were talking about light and the various spectrums and that kind of thing, and so maybe I can kind of show that here. Just wanted to lay this out properly. Let me get this set up. There we go. So this is just a simple program for taking a signal that comes in your computer, and you can do what's called an analysis, FFT analyzer. There's a spectrogram and oscilloscope, and these are different ways of looking at wavelengths and frequencies and that kind of thing. So let me just see if I can get it activated here. So I've got my sensor that we had earlier. It's just sitting here, and I've got that rigged up, and let's see if I can get a sound picture from that. I'll start these programs here. It's running off my I don't know if you can see my video properly, but on that sensor that we had before, you can see when or you might not be able to see, you can see a live stream, but
oh, I see it.
Okay, if I squeeze the sensor, it changes the signal, for example, that we see on the screen. And so okay, just the tapping, for example, you can see, especially on that bottom left screen, the spectrogram. If I just lightly tap the sensor on the table, you get that sort of thing. So what's interesting is if I was to move the sensor along the table, there's a couple of little knife marks and nicks and so on in the table. If I was to move that along the table, like right there, there, you can actually see the texture of the table from the sound of this moving along. And when it hits a little crack or crevice in the table, it produces a line in that bottom left screen there. So you can almost use it as a texture detector. There, that's my hand. Let's do you could use it to detect what do you call it? Fingerprints, probably, and so on. But anyway, if we look at the actual upper left FFT analyzer, that gives us, you can see on the bottom scale, it's the frequency, and you have different peaks. The left-hand scale is the magnitude, just so the peaks are how strong it is in certain frequencies. And you can see especially the 50 or actually 60 hertz, there's a very large peak. That first peak there, you can see it's highlighted a bit there now. And the other peaks we see are basically the harmonics of that. There's one at 120, which is double 60. There's another one at 180, which is 3 times 60, and so on. As it goes down. All of these are, Mario knows very well about the harmonics and the octave, basically, the doubling of the, but not just doubling, but in thirds and fifths and so on of the original pulse. The original would be at the 60 hertz here, though, which is common. Our bodies are basically resonating at 60 hertz from all these 60 hertz mechanisms and devices we have around us all the time. That field is happening through everything that's plugged into our outlets and so on. It might be 50 hertz in some places. I think in Europe it's 50 hertz. North America is 60 hertz and so on. So it's interesting, we have these signals, and you know, just by, like, for example, putting my hand around this changes the signal so much. And you look at that bottom left apparatus. Here's where I have two hands, one grounding it at the same time as one on it. Here's with it just grounded, it's a clear signal, there's virtually nothing there in the bottom left thing. But if I put my hand around it and get the actual okay, now there's an example of I'm holding the wire, and so that's sort of a baseline reading of the apparatus there now. I'm wondering if my voice makes a difference. Hello! Ooh. Not really. Ooh. I don't. Well, maybe it's changing somewhere else, but ooh, it's not really picking up the vibration of my voice like a microphone would. But if I put my hand around it, all of a sudden you've got all this information. It's providing, if you look at the bottom left screen here, let's bring it up, I'll make it bigger so that we can look at that individually for a bit here. On the left hand scale is the frequency, running up to as high as 22.1 thousand hertz. 22, that's 22,000 cycles per second. And it goes down in the bottom part 2.2 or 2.2 thousand or 2200 basically hertz. So the bottom, even that 60 cycle hum is just a line. That's that strong line on the bottom is our 60 cycle hum. And if I put my hand around it, you see how much information is coming through on all these different frequency levels. And there's some main streams coming through there, but it's picking up on the fields of my hand, which my hand is like picking up the fields of the environment at the same time. So this detector is now super sensitive. Through me, the detector becomes a more sensitive detector, because otherwise all we get would be this, and there's not much information on that screen, let's say, in a way that you might be able to pick up certain things better. But when I put my hand around it, all of a sudden you've got so many things to work with there, so many things to examine. Now, if I was to put my hand around it and at the same time get close to, well, first of all, let me try, I'm going to turn off, because the plasma ball's been on during this time. It may have been interrupting with our signal. I believe it has, actually. Okay, there's the signal with me holding it up. And here it is with me putting my hand around it. Okay, look at the signal now. Way less noise on the picture there compared to.
Are you still getting the 60 hertz, Rick? I'm thinking 60
yeah,
hertz.
That's still happening on the bottom there. You see the. In fact, what I'll do is I'll change the scale, because we're more interested right now in the lower. How do I do that here? I have to go into this.
Because you think the 60 hertz is coming from you or the environment? I mean,
well, it's both. That's the thing about it. It's from the environment, but it's me absorbing it from the environment. Let's see, scale and display. Where's the... Oh, there we go. I can put it down to 2000 hertz. Okay, so this goes from 0 to 2800. So basically in the lower audio range, you might say. Now we can see a very definite line. See that intense line on the bottom, that green line? That'll be your 60 cycle hum, basically. Actually, it's picking up on my voice right now. See that? Picking up on my voice. Wow, that's cool. I didn't think it could do that. Hello? Now I can talk to my apparatus. There's a slight delay for some reason. Anyways, you can see, if I stop talking, you can see the line, the intense line just above the 0 there. And then there's another one, and another one, and another thin one, and then a thicker one, and a less thick one, and then one way up above there, and so on. So there's basically the fundamental vibration of 60 and various, I think you'll find that they are of certain, okay, there's a way I can actually notate it. How is that? Oops, I shouldn't have done that. Second. There it is. What happened to my... Something messed up on the spectrogram here. Okay, let me reset the spectrogram just a second. Okay, so back to this again. So just wanted to show, the idea was I got my hand around it now. You can see the additional information with my hand around. So we could, there's, you know, essentially pulses are happening. You can see at the top there, that's at the higher frequency. And there's stuff at the low frequency. If I take my hand off, then there is some basic information, especially at the high end there. And also at the low end from, like we were saying before, from the 60 hertz. And if we were to look at that again, if I change the scale, then you can see that 60 cycle hertz coming through on the bottom, and its harmonics, its octaves and harmonics there. So again, if I put my hand around it, see how it amplifies the 60 cycle frequencies? Again, there's without my hand, and there's with my hand. See how it brings out every one of the harmonics then? So it's not my hand that's emitting the fields exactly, but it's acting as a resonator, or it is emitting, but it's re-emitting the absorbed fields that are around me here right now in the environment. And that could be You know, even from, let me try, I'll put my hand around this, and I'll take my other hand and put it up against the light here, and let's see if that makes a difference. Yep, look at that.
The light is the steering wheel.
See the difference? This is in my other hand around a light bulb. Of course, this is one of those funny LED type light bulbs. It's got an electrical circuit in it. I think I've got a different bulb here. No, it's one of the funny bulbs too, and it will have a similar whoa, boy, look at the huge pulse that comes out when I put my fingers on that bulb initially. Whoa. I don't know whether these newfangled light bulbs are the correct way to go. You see, here's a different one here. See what it does. Nowhere near, this is a different kind of bulb. It's got, when I touch it in close, it puts out lots of interesting fields. I don't have a normal bulb here, I don't think, to test readily. But okay, so we have sort of a baseline there now. I'm holding on to it. Now I'm going to turn on, I'll turn on the, I'm just going to arrange my screen so that people in the live stream can see both the things at the same time here. Okay, I think that'll work so we can get both. And if I make this that's the way to go. Okay, now, so I've got a baseline with my hand, let's say, and now I'm going to turn on the plasma ball. Let's see what happens there. Yeah, hello. Okay, so let me move this chair. Okay. I thought there would be more interference right now. We don't see that much. I think if I change the scale we would, but I'll try that in a moment. I'm going to put my hand close to the plasma ball now. Lots of full spectrum. See this? That's a lot of noise there. A lot of information on. There's huge, wide bandwidth of information there. Okay, now I'm away. I'm moving in close. This is where the fields start to pick up. This is where they start to get really, there's a band there where it's really noisy. And I go in, it's super intense there. I'm going to go in closer. Okay, now I'm actually touching the plasma ball, so it shows pretty intense there in this case. Whereas the audio that we got didn't really pick up on that so much. And as I move away, you can see how it alters the fields. There's one point where I can
see, it's interesting. There's always those gaps.
Yes, the gaps. I was just going to say that, Mario, exactly.
And you know, I'm sure this is correct, but of course it's my understanding of it. But these fields are actually spherical. We see a waveform on the scope, or we see these flat lines, but they're really layers of a field, of a sphere. Sphere inside a sphere inside a sphere. Right? So.
Yep. And those gaps are actually, maybe that's what we should be looking at in a way, in the same way that it's the gaps in the nano layers that are the important parts. That's what carries the plasma. That's what.
Yeah, it's the rests, not the notes.
Yes, exactly, Mario. That's what is interesting. The interesting part. Even there, with my hand directly on the ball, you see the gaps. They're even more predominant. They're almost like notes now. So maybe we should be playing the gaps rather than the main fare, so to speak. Now, there's something interesting here that I noticed the other day, and I want to see if I can bring it up. Let's see if that happened again here. Because what happens is, look at the signal on the right upper screen there. We have sort of your basic sort of sine wave kind of thing, right? A sine up and down, alternating sort of signal. Now, if I move my hand in close to the plasma ball, watch what happens. The signal gets kind of erratic, and then goes almost to zero at this point. And then it flips over into this mode, which is a completely different signal. And when that happens, notice on the left hand screen with all the green on it, we've lost the 60 cycle hum. It comes back when I back off again. You see it at the very bottom there now of on the left hand screen, the blue one, with the green line on the bottom. That's our 60 cycle hum, right? 60 cycle baseline.
Yeah, can you tell what it goes to?
Well, what? Yeah.
What is that?
I can show it on the other. Let me just show it again. What happens? See, it disappears when I put my hand in. Basically, this plasma ball has canceled that 60 cycle hum, or transformed it into what I believe is 120, which is double.
Oh,
and I think if we look at this screen, we should be able to see that happening.
This is what Mr. Keshe was talking about flipping the polarity, the changing from magnetical to gravitational, the way to.
Well, that could very well be. That's what I'm thinking here. So, okay, so again, just so you know, people know at home, that blue line on our FFT analyzer that we see here is at the 60, the frequency in this case is across the bottom. So at 60, you have a blue line going up, and you can see what a major peak it is. And you see the next peak, there's a peak at 120, but it's actually very small and it's canceled out. But the 180 is very high. So in this case, instead of the doubling of the harmonic, it's in thirds. Be thirds, right?
That's the third harmonic, right? That's the third harmonic. That's
okay.
E. Well, I mean, if this is a B, I think it would be an F sharp. I think this is a B.
And there's another one at 300. Exactly 300, which is 5 times 60, which would be the fifth,
the
right?
Third. That's the
fifth, right?
Well, it's funny. The one that's the fifth times 5 is the one we call the third. So if this was an A, yes, the way the ratios.
This is why I don't trust music, because
all those ratios. But the first harmonic is the
and so on.
Would be double. If it's times 3, it's the note we call the fifth higher. So it would be, if it's an A, that would be, an A would be the next octave. The next one would be the fifth. And that next one would be an E. Several octaves higher. It's 5 to 4 ratio, actually.
That's where I get all freaked out. And I can see it on this chart. It makes total sense to me. But to start talking about in terms of letters and everything is like... I lose it. The same as I lose it looking at a keyboard and going, why is it QWERTY? Why isn't it? I was taught A, B, C, D, E. Why don't we? I want to have an A, B, C, D keyboard, so when I'm hunting and pecking, I don't have to go all over the place trying to find letters that are totally scrambled to me, that are only put there because the old typewriters had these keys that slammed in, and if you had too many letters in one place, they'd all slam in together and jam up, so they had to spread them out in a certain way that was easy to type. But it has no rationale other than it was for the old typewriters. Anyway,
Well,
that just
but it
gets
makes
me
you feel
going.
any better.
Let,
When Hindemith was working on his book to write out about those ratios and stuff, he had to go over to the math department at Yale and have the math professors help him work out those ratios, because even they couldn't do it off the top of their heads, you know?
Right.
It's really complicated. There's
Yep.
a simpler way of doing
well,
it.
that's
but
why
it's just-
something visual like this is so much nicer, because now we get to look at, okay, what happens when I move this sensor, or in this case, I'm going to grab it with my hand, and you can see what my hand is absorbing. All of a sudden, if I be quiet here, maybe it'll be better. Okay, so that's the one with my hand, and this is the one without. So the amplitudes are changing, though. That's what makes it hard. I wonder if I can lock the amplitude scale. Just briefly check here.
Interesting that you have that basic, what we call the fundamental, is that peak at 60 hertz. But there's a sliding to it, isn't there? From a higher note, or is that just a part of the line function of the graph?
Well, it's moving up and down because the scale is.
No, I mean there's a sliding from the left side of the screen, sliding downwards, and then you have that peak there, right? So what is that? Is that a note, or is that just a function of the graph it has to connect, or something like that?
Sorry, let me get that from you again, because I've just locked the frequencies so they're not bouncing around now. So I think it'll be easier now to have a look at it. Okay, sorry, what you're saying about which peaks now?
Well, you have a continuous line from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's one line. Mm-hmm. So is that necessary for the graph, or is there an actual note from the left side? You see that line going, and then it peaks. Peak should be the fundamental. But is that a note?
Well, there's definitely everything on that line. Like you can see, the line actually goes up toward the left. So as it goes into the really low frequencies down to 1, 2, and 3 hertz, it's actually increasing in amplitude. So there's a lot of low frequency sounds that it's picking up on. So every little blip or every alteration on this graph is some sort of real, called a note, but a frequency that's being processed. And of course the program takes its analysis every so often. It chops up the signal into a certain frequency of sampling. So according to its sample rate will be how accurate it is in certain frequencies and so on. But I just note when I put my hand around it, you can see how some of the things are changed. For example, that 120 becomes more pronounced now. You see the next peak beside the 60 cycle basic one. Now it has a bit of a peak to it. If I take my hand off, we let it settle out here, it doesn't quite go away, but it's quite a bit smaller. So I'm just noting that. And now let me try moving my hand toward the plasma ball. Okay, I'm getting closer and closer. It's increasing the amplitude. I'm going to have to I'm going to have to run it on a variable thing here so that it ends up showing for us. So I had that turned off. If I put it on auto, oh, I see, I can change it up or down. That's a good way to do it then. Okay, my hand's on it, getting closer to the plasma ball, closer and closer. I'm gonna have to put it on auto because it's just going too high up on the scale, so let's do it that way. Put it on auto, the scale will be changing automatically, but we'll see. I'm more interested in the picture. Alright, so look at that 60 cycle hertz go down as my hand gets close to the plasma ball. It's almost zero now at about 10 centimeters from the ball. And now I'm getting really close to the ball. Now I'm touching the ball. And while I'm touching the ball, it's eliminated. Look at that. It's eliminated that 60 cycle. In fact, the 60 cycle is a trough. Instead of, I'll move my hand away again. And you see it build up at the 60 cycle. It's the biggest peak of the whole thing. I put my hand back on the plasma ball, and it takes away that entire signal. And now the 120 is the most prominent signal. So it somehow transformed that 60 cycle hum into, it's neutralized it and made it a 120 as the main, what do you call it, the main harmonic or the main octave. So I think that's really bizarre. I don't have a rational explanation for that right now. But it's cool. It's because, to me, it indicates somehow plasma has a neutralizing effect of the 120 hertz, or sorry, the 60 cycle hertz that is normally in our body from all the machinery around us, all the wires in the walls and all the lights and everything else. So if we had, essentially, if I had this little plasma ball as my buddy, see, walk around with my plasma ball, it neutralizes that 60 cycle hum. So it makes sense if you had a little battery operated device, you could easily neutralize that 60 cycle hum. Alright, makes sense? Cool. Maybe I've just invented a plasmatic device that will get rid of those 60 cycle blahs that people talk about. So interesting. Anyway, I just noticed that the other day when I was playing around with this this graph, that it's had the effect of neutralizing the. Now I'll try it just straight without my hand being on the sensor. I've just got my fingers on the ground part of it, so I'm grounded, and the sensor should be doing its thing. I'm moving it closer and closer. You start to see that 60 cycle come down, the 120 goes up, and right about there it's pretty much neutralized. I'm right up against the plasma ball now, and that seems to like smooth everything out. It kind of likes that thing stopped jumping around, and it's gotten rid of the 60, and there's a 120 and a couple other ones, but they're like they just diminish from there compared to having it away, where there's a lot more peaks and there's a lot more harmonics going on and so on. I'll move it into that busy area. It increases the amplitude of all of the wave, but it also, at a certain point, it's bye-bye to that 60 cycle hum, and it totally disappears and all smooths out that whole first part of the wave. Interesting. Okay, so anything else that anyone wants me to show with this apparati? Just sort of waving the sensor across the ball here, trying to see what that waveform looks like. Touching it pretty much overloads the whole thing. Well, interesting anyways. So it's fun to get, it's actually possible, it's hard on Zoom here, but it's possible to get both the visual and the audio going at the same time. And so then you've got an interesting sensor that can be sort of played with to come up with different ways of seeing and sensing. Oh, I wanted to put on the frequency back up to 22,000 here and have a look at that spectrogram again, because as you can see, it's actually the high end from about 18,000 up to 22,000 that becomes predominant when my hand's on it. So again, take my hand off, put my hand on. You can see a whole upper area becomes amplified. And if I was to turn on the plasma ball, put it close to it, let's see what, first of all, that's just turning on the plasma ball. It introduces more spectrum. You see as I get closer, and over a meter away now, it starts to introduce, you see that whole secondary line from, what is it, 9,000 to 13,000. Then if I move in closer, things become more amplified. Some definite lines there where there's predominance. And as I get closer and closer, there's a lot of stuff coming through. And finally right up close to the ball itself, and that's against the plasma ball there. And as I fade back, etc. So, interesting. A lot of stuff coming out of a simple plasma ball. It's wide spectrum, like I was saying, and it's each of these fields, each of these spheres that the plasma ball sets up. You can imagine it as it's basically an emitting antenna. Essentially, these balls, any sphere has a certain resonant frequency, for example. It's going to be an antenna of a certain kind just because of its shape and size. So you can imagine this plasma ball is actually emitting these fields out, sending signals or some sort of information, and actually not sending, but more importantly, it acts as a plasmatic antenna. And this is a new idea in last decade or so, I think. Perhaps before that, in some of the research that various entities have done. But essentially, you create a plasma field, a plasmatic entity, and that becomes your antenna. So they can do that now. They set up a series of some sort of emitters that end up creating a plasma, and that plasma becomes your actual antenna. So you can set up an antenna anywhere by creating this plasmatic field, and that's essentially what this plasma ball is doing. It's creating it creates a plasma field, a plasmatic field, which by definition has its own spectrum of emissions. And SpaceStream has put in an application, Gen 2 Studio. I'll have a look at that. Linux audio workstation. Will it work in real time? That's the question. I'll have a look at that and see if it might be useful. So I'm looking for other options, especially for people with PC systems. But it has to work in real time is the thing in order to properly transform the sound in real time. Okay, I'll have a look at that later. Okay, any other questions or comments about this stuff that I brought up here? See, Martin, your microphone's open again.
Okay. Sorry.
You can speak if you want to.
Especially it's to that machine that you have shown. I cannot say something because I don't know that, but I mean, it's every computer and every pad is a very magic thing. So because every color, figure, symbol, noise, sound, interaction makes then a real thing inside us, or in the surroundings here, in the room. When you have the light or when you have the TV on, then that ID or that wave of quality vibration, you can really make a real world out of that. It's just but it's just a piece of glass. And
yes, indeed, that's right. I've just for comparison, I've plugged in my little radio that I've shown before, crystal radio system here that was produced as a meditation device originally and supposed to not be used for radio kind of stuff, but I put a pigtail on it here so I could plug it into an audio plug and plug it into my computer so I could actually listen to what the radio hears. And if I plug that into my same system that I have here, you can see the signal from the radio, and it's very similar to the signal from the detector that I had set up. Similar but sort of different spread. It's also very heavy on that lower end. I wanted to have a look at the I'll change the frequency the frequency spread to get that. Yeah, it picks up on that 60 cycle hum even more so with this radio because it's designed to pick up on low end frequencies. This is actually tuned to the Schumann Earth harmonic, this radio, to the harmonics of the Schumann frequency, which is different than most crystal radios, which are tuned to a radio frequency. So we see lots of amplification of those signals here. And I don't see that baseline going away in this case. It seems to stay there. See that the 60 cycle hum is not going away. Huh, interesting. So it's not, it doesn't seem to be altering that particular circuit. We look at it again in the other way we have of showing it. Bring the radio in closer, closer and closer, and you see the 60 cycle hum stays there. There's no not much change really. Interesting. Well, anyway, we kind of got into great detail about all this sort of thing, and didn't mean to quite get so involved, but it is quite interesting, I find, on a certain level, that we have ways of detecting fields that we can't see is the main idea here. And it can be even fun to do.
And steer even and also steering. We have tools to steer those fields, you know, with those glass miracles or those glass pads or whatever. You can make a lot of things.
It's true. We have ways of both detecting, and because we can detect, we can also usually, if you can detect a wave, then you can also reproduce it with a device of some sort. So if we can find ways to detect some of the subtle fields coming off of our devices or ganses and so on, perhaps we can find ways of altering those and increasing them to the point where they have significant field interactions. You know, it'd be great to come up with the right combination of ganses that produce light just from the combination. Maybe just, you know, pouring the right combination of ganses together, and suddenly it turns into a nice light that's everlasting. That would be cool. And it may be through some sort of software like this that we get indications, because sometimes you get, I was surprised to have this 160 cycle hum totally go away and be inverted into 120 or whatever it does. I'm sure there's some sort of rationale to it, but I don't know what that is at this point. So it's kind of delightful just to find something like that, and I wouldn't have found it unless I had the visual representation to be able to go off of. So, and I may not have looked into the visual one if I hadn't had the audio one to trigger me to think, you know, what does this waveform look like that I'm listening to? And so on. So you can interact. It's the great thing about it, it's live in real time. And well, not quite, because there's a bit of lag due to our ears and eyes, and the light takes time to travel, and the interactions of the computer take time to calculate, but it's still within milliseconds, which is still a long ways removed from instant communication and having a instantly feeling of the fields. But it's still very close. It can be a approximation of that instant feeling of the fields, and maybe can give us an idea where to poke at in order to get more results.
So in my case, I use the pads or the the phones to steer my corners of the house, you know. So I have like balls or whatever, or colored papers, and then I have to pad on that place or on a card when I want to steer some weather movements in a special place. And so then I go to that place with the weather card that I think it's the best for that region, and then I steer with the pad or the handy, so I can show my wish for the wind direction. So you can use those, or I use those technical systems for steering things outside, you know, the sun and the weather.
Yeah, that was part of the radionics, I believe it's called, and work of what's his name? Back in around the Second World War time. He got put in prison eventually and so on in the U.S. What's his name? That was working with cloud busting and whatnot.
No, it's not that. It's not just, you know, the tools, but these light emitting systems like we have now. You know, they are very
Wilhelm
precise.
Reich. Sorry, it was, well, I remember, I won't forget in the next minute. Wilhelm Reich was his name. He produced machines that he could direct at the clouds, and had certain fields that would be emitted that would disperse clouds or that kind of thing. I worked with orgone energy, I believe it was called, which is like essential energy, life energy. Pardon me?
The cloudbusters.
Yeah.
This is a very helpful tool to steer or to interact the water with the water and light. It's very helpful. You can use that really good outside, you know, inside too, if you.
It's true, and these devices and this system I've set up here is essentially, especially when you're actually holding on to a test tube full of water and so on, and it's, you know, the detectors inside of water, that it's essentially detecting water. When we use our bodies as detectors, it's our body of fluids that make such a good detector. It's a perfect radio antenna, essentially. In fact, if you look at one of the newest antennas for the U.S. Navy, it's so simple and so beautiful of a design. Basically, you take a pump and you pump salt water from the ocean, and you make it go into a stream that streams out from your nozzle off the side of the ship, and that stream of salt water becomes your antenna. And you just simply connect a wire to that stream, and you can transmit and receive on that antenna according to the length of the arc of the water. And it's such a beautiful idea. And of course, you're in the ocean, there's lots of salt water, no shortage of antenna material. And you can then create any frequency antenna you wish to listen in on whatever it is you want to listen into. But it just illustrates how good salt water is as a receptor of the fields and transmitter of the fields. And we are basically bags of salt water. So, and maybe that's our true function, is to become receiver and emitters of fields. That's the beauty of being on this planet and being in the physicality as a soul. we get to experiment is, oh, what happens to this bag of salt water when we expose it to these fields? Oh, I see. Well, how about these fields? And what about when two of these bags of salt water interact with each other? The fields interact with each other. Oh, I see. All kinds of stuff happens, and so on. Where would we be without our bags of salt water? We would be empty fields that wouldn't have any potency without the bags of salt water to manifest them. Big idea, huh? So it takes the empty bag of salt water for our soul to manifest its weaker but yet very powerful and principle type fields. But the fields don't manifest unless it has a vehicle to manifest in, similar to, you know, the fields of the plasma ball are kind of small compared to when I get my field interacting with it. Then it extends out the fields of the plasma ball. We can measure it easier through my body than we can even directly. So it's interesting. What else can I measure here while I'm measuring? Well,
if you have that such if you are on such a ship, when you pull that saltwater stream out in space, and then you have like a high charge reaction of by the splitting of the water molecules, like and then you have high voltage, and you're splitting even maybe then the salt molecules from the water molecules as a two. I would say this is a perfect desalination position as a water interaction.
I see what you're saying. Yes, quite possibly. Like making it, spraying it out and making it into a vapor, into a fine particle spray. Because we know the charge changes on the fine particles, and there's a certain optimum size that creates an electrical field, in effect. Yeah, it could be a spray-on plasma antenna. In fact, maybe every time we spray, we're creating a plasmatic antenna. This is GANS water. There's a plasmatic antenna there. I'm amplifying the fields of my body with it. This is one I put together just for fun. I don't know if it still works. I can't figure out where this...
Is that your plasma gun?
Oh, there it is. No, this is one of them. Yeah, this is. He's got a plasma ball there, rotating pretty good. And then when you spray it, the spray comes out through the plasma ball, and you get the double effect of the interaction of the GANs and the GANS ball plus the GANS spray coming out. Thought that's kind of cool. Besides, they're only like $3, so it's worthwhile for an experiment. $3 and some hot glue, and you're good to go.
Can I make an observation here about this graph we're looking at?
Yep.
These ratios here will always be these ratios, no matter what you're looking at. And somehow these would be Fibonacci. This is golden ratio, and it's always the same. The only thing that will ever change is the amplitude. In other words, you saw the 60 drop in amplitude and the 120 go up, whatever. But there'll always be these ratios: the double, and then the ×3, and then the double again, and then so on. These ratios are always the same in every single plasma. always exactly the same, an onion or whatever. And every one of these lines represents a layer of the fields, which are Coulomb barriers. So there's a whole onion of Coulomb barriers that we're looking at.
Exactly. Yeah. Well put, Mario. That's right. And that's what I realized too, working with this plasma ball. Like normally we think of the fields coming out like waves or something, and like being consistent. You think there should be a consistency to an emitter, that it just puts out, waves, and they gradually dissipate according to a square law and all that kind of thing. But no, it goes out and then and then in the same way. If you look at the atom, you've got the layers of the electrons. The electrons only are in certain shells. You got a shell here, a shell here, a shell here, and the electrons jump from one shell to the other. They don't kind of hang out sort of in between. Oh, I think I'll maybe be here, maybe be there. No, it's I'm here, and then I'm here. And when they jump from one outer one to an inner one, for example, and they lose that energy, that's when they emit the light. That's when the light comes off of an atom, is when there's a jump down in the energy fields from one of these quantum levels, these shells that you speak of. So there's like a shell within a shell within a shell, and each one has its own energy level, and we could see that on the graph, and we could hear that in our audio. We get close to that plasma ball, there's like boom, a shell, and it's really loud, and there's that shell is, you cannot deny it. And another inner shell, you cannot deny that there's one there. And you get into the inner, and all of a sudden it's a quiet area in the middle. What's with that? Right? But in a similar way, I think we'll find in, whether it's the atomic level or whether it's, you look at the various galaxies, they're in definite, shells or levels or Coulomb barriers of various kinds and various fields. So it's an important idea.
I mean, it also, you can imagine the frets on a guitar, how from the left side to the right side, the gaps between the frets get smaller and smaller and smaller. But you see the amplitude is way down on the right side as opposed to the left side. So the amplitude is what's dropping, but the amount of layers is increasing as you go towards the right. So as you're going towards,
so there's more complexity on the right hand side, but less amplitude, you could say.
Yeah, and the ratios will repeat in octaves too, or after so many. I'm not sure how that works, actually. That's interesting.
Well, it kind of gets tighter and tighter with the octaves, because if you're at, say, difference between 10,000 here and 20,000, for example, at the end of the graph, there's not a very big jump, and everything gets jumbled up. It'd be very hard for our ears to discriminate all those overlaying kind of peaks. But as opposed to the 60, the 120, the 180, they're all very definite. You could filter them out as very definite sound peaks that would be easy to discriminate. As they get tighter and tighter together, the difference between them would be harder to discriminate for us as humans, I think. The distance becomes smaller between the notes.
So you're just hearing sort of a slushing through, as opposed to hearing a specific. And I'm pretty sure. Now,
if we were dog ears, if we could graph some dog ears on, maybe we'd hear all the intricate details of that high-end sound. Instead of going, we'd hear, because in a way I do that with my software. I take the stuff that's from 10,000 to 20,000. That's the idea. That's the area I'm actually kind of interested in. I use my software to transform that down to, say, 1,000 to 2,000 from 10,000 to 20,000. My ears can only hear up to probably 10,000. So if I transform that sound down, then suddenly I can hear it in a range that's normal to me. So I hear the dog sounds, in effect, that way, through my software. Things you never normally hear at all. And that's what makes it really fascinating to use something like this little radio here. It picks up radio frequencies that might be, oh, say 20,000 hertz. Actually might be a low-end radio frequency, or maybe I think it's 580 kilohertz would be a AM radio station. So essentially you can take AM and transform it down into something in the audio range that you can. That's what radios do in effect, but you can do that through the software too, to take a vibration that we can't hear, whether it's at the low end. Anything under about 25 hertz we can't hear, but I can increase it and put it up to 250 hertz instead of 25. And then suddenly all those low end sounds become kind of sounds, if you know what I mean. Transformation.
Yeah, and that's what the infrared cameras do too.
Yes.
They're bringing it up an octave or whatever.
Yes, yes, exactly. So by doing that, and that's one of the great things as humans, I think, that we're able to do, is we can transform ourselves to be able to see and hear and experience octaves below and above our normal range, which by artificial means. And that's what a microscope does, for example. Normally we can't see bacteria and viruses and, you know, parasites and that kind of thing, and we put them under a microscope and you go, oh my god, all of that was on my keyboard? I can't believe it. You know, I had this girl that's a barista at the local coffee shop, and she was telling me the other day, she's what do you call it, a molecular biochemist or whatever, taking her degree, and she was saying that they just did an experiment where they had some milk, and they just put the milk out for a few hours at room temperature, and they looked at it under the microscope before and after leaving it out for a few hours or whatever, and she was just like horrified at all these different, all this activity of these microbes inside the milk from the milk, you know, starting to enhance other life forms as it deteriorates and so on. Basically, it's what we call rotting or
cheesing.
Pardon me?
Cheesing.
Cheesing, yes, that's when it's controlled, it's cheesing, or when it's just rotting, then it's bacteria that you don't want getting in and creating havoc, basically, and making it poisonous to humans and whatnot. Sour milk is, there's two ways to do it. One is to make it into sour cream and have it as a beneficial thing, or the other way is just let the milk go sour and it'll be truly sour milk that can make you sick. So, yeah, it's interesting, anyways, that that aspect of things. Yeah, so the octave is pretty important. As you know very well, Marion, have been teaching for quite some time now to try to get us to pay more attention to that. And also this idea of the intervals and so on too, which is another big idea.
Yeah, if you look at this, this is actually a single musical tone. This is actually a single plasma. It's what every structure is. That fundamental would be the lowest layer, and the structure keeps going up in octaves and octaves and octaves and octaves, up to where its mass allows. Actually, it goes from the right side outwards. Well, I guess it goes both ways, doesn't it?
Well, the thing is, that's the signal that we get, well, like right now, just from the little radio here, from the ambient atmosphere and so on. The actual plasma, what I would call more of a plasma, if we were to think of it in terms of ionized plasmas, would be the plasma ball. And we note that the plasma ball doesn't put out the same frequencies, or not in the same way. It actually negates or seems to null out that 60 cycle hum, which is quite interesting.
It changes the key, is all it's doing.
Yes,
but the ratios will be exactly the same.
Right.
Ratios,
yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So this is a single musical tone, and when I say plasma, I mean Keshe plasma definition.
Right. Any kind of plasma, basically.
Every kind of plasma. Oh, we have a fundamental note made up of layers, and it's always the same ratios, but the keys change. Nothing in the universe has this exact same pitch. We're all slightly different. But I think humans are within the comma of each other, we say, but not exactly the same. But we will always have the same ratios. But you see the difference in the amplitude of the various layers, and how you flipped at one point where the 60 went down and it became very, well, inaudible, so to speak, and the 120 went up. So the amplitude, this is timbre, is what's called timbre, right?
Okay.
All of the harmonics are there, but some of them are less audible than others. It's interesting how it flipped the way you did that. Very interesting. But always the same ratios. So we're looking at the structure of a plasma field. The
and
layers.
That's why it's hard to say, what is the frequency of a plasma? Oh, well, it's got like 10 billion frequencies. Which one would you like to focus on? Which one would you like to focus on today?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly why Mr. Keshe says you can't use frequency. Plus, the frequencies of these layers, they're all different. There are the ratios. It's actually 2 to 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3, 5 to 4. Those are, if you calculate those as frequencies, every one of these is a different frequency. And so unique, you know what I mean? The frequency between the waves are not exact. And they're sort of rounded off in that upper right graph there, but they're not exactly the same. They'll never be exactly the same. The layers all have their own individual, but they're. But
I think another thing that just came to mind that might be part of the problem of trying to define things in these ways is that initial what do you call it? That the prime frequency, the tone, the tonic. I think we talked about the other day. That initial tonic that we see here in the graph, which would be that 60 cycle sort of main peak there, is like hum. It's that's the big tonic, you could say. But now, like when I was just showing with putting the detector close to the plasma ball, that tonic is virtually disappears. So that means that
it's still there. It's still there. It's just reduced in amplitude.
Well, in effect, canceled in a way too. So.
Oh well, maybe okay, maybe. And you know what's interesting? There is the essence of creation. If you start at the very, I don't think we don't have at the very right side of the screen. That's not the actual center. You have to probably keep going farther than that. But when you start, if you take the actual frequencies of the first layer to the second layer, which is too small to see on this scale, you get the difference of those. And so all of these layers are being built up by the difference of each of the layers that are spiraling up from the center. As soon as the second layer is formed, the difference of that equals another layer. And then the next layers and the layers, the layers. So the fundamental base, this last one at 60 hertz, is the difference between the difference of every one of these layers here, and then and those layers subtracted, and those layers subtracted, and those layers subtracted. That's why you have an onion of layers there, and that's ultimately the fundamental base, we call it, because it's the lowest hertz.
So it's true that sometimes the fundamental basically gets lost by the overlapping of the other fields, because what we hear is like the remainder like normally when you play music, that fundamental gets, the other notes get laid on top, so we hear the other notes because it cancels that fundamental in a way. It takes away from the fundamental. Otherwise, that's all we would hear would be the fundamental. But
yeah, it's sort of like when you take your finger and you put it over. Like if I pluck my A string on the guitar, you hear the lower A. But if I just touch my finger over the center part, very lightly, bing, I hear the next one. So in a way, you've canceled out the...
Right, every time you hear something other than that initial A, means it's canceling out part of that initial A at least, if not the whole tone that we hear.
Yeah, and I think it's really not canceling it. I think it's just reducing its amplitude so that it's no longer audible. You're sort of muting the A
that's
string.
essentially that's what wave cancellation is. Like, that's what we see in this graph on the left is what's left over after all the waves have canceled. This is the net result. And it may be that 60 cycle might have one that goes down and one that goes up and two others that go up, and you add them all together, that's the net result is this line. Same as with the oscilloscope is a net result of its computations. There could be pluses and minuses that are not shown because what we're just seeing is the net result, which is the best our machinery can kind of do in the moment. But each of these spectrums is a different way of looking at that net result in a way too. Each of them has a way of analyzing in the moment what the waveform looks like or what the fields look like, essentially.
Yeah, and this is where we get off in our perceptions. It looks like a wave on that right, or it looks like these, but it's really layers of an onion. It's really a spherical, so we we could tend to lose that and call it wave function and so on, or particles. These
and you mentioned this in sound and music as well, that it's actually you're creating a sphere of music or spherical tones going out, and it's anytime we try to analyze it in terms of waveforms like we're looking at, we're really missing the visualization of what the wave actually looks like. We think we're seeing it, and we are on a two-dimensional sort of flat basis, but it actually has this not only three-dimensional but four-dimensional. It's moving in time and transforming in time as well. So, and not to mention the 5 and 6 and other dimensions adding into it, but just to look at it from the physicality point of view, and the way that works.
Yeah, the music of the spheres that the ancients called it. The music of everything's spherical, a sphere inside a sphere inside a sphere. And really, when you look at the upper right here, this waveform that's the beating of the heart. It looks like one single peak, but that's created because it's pulsing. It's expanding and contracting. So this whole thing is actually expanding and contracting. So if you look at it at the upper right, it's at full contraction at the bottom of what we would call the wave, and then it's expanding, and then it's contracting, and it's expanding, and it's contracting, and it's expanding. This, right? I mean, this would you could be looking at an electrocardiogram of your heart,
right? Yeah.
But it's not actually waves. Your heart's beating. It's expanding and contracting. So that's what, and we lose the perception of the reality of it when we see these kind of representations of it. Nobody looks at an electrocardiograph and thinks that it's your heart is waving, it's beating, it's pulsing, expanding and contracting. So it's it's easy to not get confused there. But here we tend to lose track of that. And the whole science is all based on waves and particles. Not that. It's plasma beating. Every layer is expanding, contracting, pushing the next layer out, expanding, contracting, and you have the difference of those is creating the new sets of layer and all that business.
Yep, that's right. So, even though these tools can be useful, we have to know the limitations of what we're looking at here, and what is it we're really looking at. And I mean, even there are models of using the onion layer effect is in a way quite primitive, of course, and there's lots more ways of looking at that whole phenomenon that are quite detailed and quite both scientific and also in other ways of looking at it too. So many different levels, many different dimensions, but the idea is that perhaps there are some tools out there similar to this that we might find useful for our experiments. And eventually it becomes down to what are the fields we are detecting, and what difference is it going to make anyways to our interaction with them. What is it we want to do with these fields, and who are
it would
we
be
anyway?
really nice if we could figure out a way to get different readings from the different GANs materials, for example, that you could find the actual pitch. It doesn't necessarily mean, like, if you were to find, if you could get a control and say every time you have CUO that it reads as an A flat or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an A flat. It means that your interaction between your mic and that GANs in that container is giving that pitch. But as long as it, yeah, so we don't have to say CUO is a A flat, but if we can get a consistent measure.
Yes, and I think maybe part of that, according to what we sort of discovered earlier tonight, is that if we put out a signal, a certain signal, maybe it's, you know, C, let's say this will be the C test. So you put out a C signal, and then the receiver should pick up the C signal. And so you have the transmitter and receiver have their relationship, and you see the C signal. It might look like the peak that we see at the 60 hertz, but it would be a different position or whatever. And then we introduce the GANs into that. The GANs, because it also is in water, it picks up the signal, and according to how much it absorbs and transmits, how much it gives and receives and gives and receives, it should show up in the graph. Certain GANs should give or receive the signal that we put in. And perhaps if we put in a multi-frequency signal of a wide spectrum, and we expect to get out a certain number of lines on our spectrum, if some of those lines are missing, then we know that the material is absorbing those frequencies, and we should be able to, you know, technically discern between distilled water and GANs water of different types. It makes perfect sense. I'm sure they have apparatus similar to that, spectrograph, you know, analysis and that kind of thing that might be similar in this case.
Well, that's exactly what the spectrographs are doing in a different way. They're actually doing that and getting a structure that looks exactly like this in one way or another.
Yeah.
And certain of these harmonics are muted, so to speak. The amplitude is reduced. That's timbre. It's called timbre. That's what makes a piano sound different from a flute.
So I guess the idea here is, do we put in a piano signal or a flute signal in order to get a response from the GANs? What do they like in order to give the most response so that we can compare them easily? Because if they don't respond much, then there's not much to compare. But if they get really happy about that flute sound, and you know, all of a sudden all the responses here, all the peaks are going crazy because the GANs likes, it responds to that timbre, let's say.
Well, I'm not sure that would matter very much, as long as whatever you're using to measure, you always use the same timbre. You can't
so that's what I mean. We'd have to find the correct timbre that works for our measurement and use that as the standard.
Like a piano has the most harmonics. things like a sine wave, a basic sine wave has the fewest harmonics. So it might be better to have, it might be interesting to find out whether one that has the most harmonics or the one that has the fewest harmonics would be the easiest one to deal with. I don't think it matters. I don't know, it might matter. If something's amplitude is in tune, if there's no amplitude of, say, that third harmonic, that's third peak or whatever, then and a GANS has that, then it's not going to get an interaction because the wave you're putting out doesn't have that frequency, so it can't interact with it. See, if you see what I mean. So perhaps the one that has the most would be the one that I don't know, that's it. Or the one that has the least, I don't know, that's interesting.
Depends on whether we're taking the transmittance of the GANs, what it's transmitting as a field, or what it's absorbing as a field.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly
because,
right.
We know that, it's giving and taking. So what is it giving? What is it taking? And if we know that it absorbs certain fields of certain call it frequencies, but it's more of a certain range of fields, let's say, or certain tone or certain baseline tone, then perhaps we'd be able to match that up with the baseline tone of certain organs or certain cancers or certain effects that we want to.
I spend hundreds of hours trying to find anything that you could get that would give you a consistent, something that looks consistent every time I put 10 milliliters of CuO in this type of container, and I always get the same reading that's different from CO2 or CH3. Then that would be good enough at least to start,
Yeah, that's right. And then you can refine that to the purest CO2 GANs versus kind of one that's mixed in with zinc oxide and some copper oxide and stuff, and to try to put them together side by side and say, look, we can see the difference here in this peak of the graph because of the impurities that are in the GANs. And if we could do that and have it consistent, that would be such a useful tool to all the experimenters, but especially to the factories that will be producing the GANSs. It'd be part of the backing up of how to produce the most pure and best GANs for certain purposes and intentions and so on. Especially if we can read the intention into our graphs could read the intention of the GANs in effect.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to see if you get a flat CuO or a CO2, and then you write love on the container and see if it changes.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you got a big peak under the unconditional love frequency of the graph or whatever that looks like. Is there a frequency to love? Is there a objective way to measure unconditional love? There's a question for you. If love is actually a force and not an emotion, which some say, then how can we measure it?
That's interesting. It might turn out what to do. Increase the amplitude? Is that what it would do? I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a very powerful idea, actually. If we can measure it, then if you could measure objective love coming from someone or something. That sounds like a dangerous device in the wrong hands. You don't love me. My device says you don't love me. But I do. I really do love you. No, the device says you don't, so I'm returning the ring. Who knows? Okay, well, how are we doing here? We've managed to waste about 3.5 hours of your time so far. How do you like it so far?
Before you use the ring back, make sure that your device has no malfunction.
Yeah, I guess so, eh? Okay, let me see. I see Jan in the chat has put a link into the Wilhelm Reich Orgone Energy Cloudbuster Rainmaker, and I'll put that link back into our Zoom chat here for those that are into cloud busting. And maybe I'll put the other link from the audio software that was mentioned by Space Stream in the other chat live stream. And people can look at that. I'm not sure if that software will work. I'll put in the name of the software that I use for the audio work. And it's available for, I believe it's Mac and PC now. Oops. There it is for live stream. And I'll put that note in the chat here. It's just that Audio Hijack Pro is the software I use for sound. You can look it up on the internet. There's links available. There's a free example you can use to get started with. I think it continues to work perfectly, other than after a few minutes of use it puts on audio watermark, which makes it kind of obnoxious to use beyond that. Or it might have a 2-week expiry maybe on the new one. I think they might have changed that. In any case, you can give that software a go if you like and hook things up to your computer. You can hook up a simple crystal radio circuit. Works really well, actually. And you can run it through the Audio Hijack software for great fun and learning. I spent actually hundreds of hours with that, and actually had a few instances of some very strange and unusual results. But it's all in your own processes, depending on what's going on inside of you. That's the beauty of it. So that's what actually changes things, according to what you expect and what you are listening for, and if you're open to new things coming in, or if you've already made up your mind about what's coming through, and it all makes a big difference. Again, our attention. Okay, I'm thinking we might wrap things up here, unless there's somebody has some burning input that they must get out. Any other topics, ideas, questions, comments, or otherwise? Shall we wrap things up? Somehow that link failed to post. Maybe it's just the maybe it's the star marks in there. Let me just try that again. Here it goes. again. Huh. Fails to post that links for some reason. Let's try the link by itself. Okay, the link went through, but the whole, when I tried to just copy from the post and put it in live stream, it wouldn't go through. Alright, well, people can check it out. Now I will also check out that hint. Thank you for that. Alright, I think we're going to wrap things up then. Thank you everybody once again for being with me today as we went through some of this field-based detection apparatus. It's kind of fun. And maybe we'll do a little more on that. There's a couple of instances I'd like to show and explain about that as well another time. So this will be Rick out, Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for Wednesday, which is now Wednesday, March 14th, 2018. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you again next week. And be sure to check out the Knowledge Seekers Workshop coming up on Thursday. We also have more of the Exploring Plasma Science coming up next Monday. And also the One Nation, One Planet, One Race for World Peace on Tuesdays. Those are the public teachings. And of course there's also private teachings for those that are students of the KFSSI, Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute. I encourage people to sign up there. It's €100 a year for student, and you can have access to all the videos they have there, and the almost pretty much daily workshops that are going on, presented by various teachers, including Caroline, who has a weekly workshop that's usually 5 or 6 hours long, I understand. And that's always interesting. Okay, enough for now. Let's wrap it up. Thanks everyone. See you next time.